My name's Joseph Givargis. I'm the executive director of Our Revolution, and I'm going to be moderating this discussion today. And our discussion topic is pretty straightforward. Why should progressives vote in this moment? And more importantly, how do we continue to keep winning progress in 2024 and beyond? Let me start by noting that 2024 marks Our Revolution's 8th anniversary. Bernie started Our Revolution after his 2016 presidential bid to make sure that progressives continue to flex their electoral muscle and influence American politics at every level. But right now, as we get ready to mobilize our base to vote in November, we're confronted with two very real problems. The first problem is political. After Biden's disastrous debate, progressive voters are predicting Democratic defeat. Our Revolution's post-debate survey of 20,000 supporters showed that 70% want the president to drop out of the race. Even worse, 1 in 3 progressives said that they're less likely to vote for the president after seeing the results of the debate. In a tight race against Donald Trump, we know that the Biden-Harris ticket can't afford to lose a single vote. But right now, based on our communications with our members, he's hemorrhaging support, progressive support. The second problem that we face is policy. Progressives are disappointed with what Democrats are delivering or failing to deliver at the national level. From the Green New Deal to Gaza, many progressives feel that the Biden-Harris administration has betrayed our ideals and negotiated bad deals. Even though progressives went to bat for Build Back Better, progressive priorities like universal pre-K, expanding Medicare to cover dental, vision, and hearing, and ending fossil fuel subsidies were gutted because Biden was co-opted by corporatist Democrats like Manchin and Sinema. So the bottom line is this: progressives feel pissed off, given both the political and policy dynamics that we find ourselves in. In fact, our post-debate poll showed that only 9% of progressives said they felt hopeful or fired up about this election. That's right, just 9%. The silver lining here, if there is one, is that over 97% of progressives that we polled agree that we cannot allow Donald Trump to prevail. And so this post-debate disparity between the 9% who feel fired up and the 97% of progressives who want to take out Trump is what we're going to talk about today. Every progressive wants to defeat Trump, but only a fraction feel energized to fight for Biden. Our latest progressive poll that we're releasing today shows that progressives aren't pumped up by the president's post-debate performance either. 70% said that Biden's post-debate appearances are not improving his chances of defeating Trump, and about 70% said that Biden is unlikely to beat Trump or they're unsure if he can do so. And maybe the most damning finding is that 34% said that his post-debate appearances have further reduced their chances, the likelihood of voting for Joe Biden. Given these results, it's clear that the progressive movement needs real motivation in this election cycle. Democrats have got to prioritize activating the progressive base now more than ever. And honestly, this is an opportunity for the progressive movement to have an outsized impact on policy and elections in this cycle. Look, no matter who's at top of the ticket, our job remains the same. We've got to defeat Donald Trump and the far right, and we've got to fight for progressive policies that improve the material conditions of the American people. We all know that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. We can't ignore the fact that he's declared that he's going to be a dictator on day one. We can't ignore the Project 2025 blueprint that his allies are putting together. But look, at the end of the day, people need something to vote for, not just somebody to vote against. We've got to make it clear that not only will Trump roll back progress, but that Democrats will advance progress. We've got to make a clear case of what 4 more years will look like and give the American people hope that their lives will improve. And in this moment, it's especially important that we focus on exciting candidates who are vying for down-ballot races and for ballot measures at the state and local level to inspire as much turnout as we can and help lift the top of the ticket. And that's why I'm excited to have this timely conversation today. We've got an all-star lineup on the stage. We've got Representative Ro Khanna from California. We've got St. Louis Board of Alders President Megan Green, who's also an Our Revolution board member. We've got Maryland Delegate Gabe Acevero. And we've got my brother Larry Stafford, the Executive Director of Progressive Maryland. And so I'm going to lay out a question, a very simple question, and give our panelists an opportunity to respond. And then we're going to, if we have time, open it up for questions towards the very end. I also want to add that Representative Barbara Lee is on her way. She got delayed getting out of D.C. because of votes, but she is going to be joining us in about 20 minutes. So with that, I want to ask our panel, and we'll start with Ro. How do we make the case to excite the progressive base and get out the progressive vote, both nationally and locally in this moment? And how do we make sure that progressives are central to this electoral effort?
Well, first of all, thank you, Joseph, for putting this together, but more importantly, for your brilliant leadership at Our Revolution and turning Our Revolution into one of the strongest progressive forces in the country. Let's give Joseph and the team a round of applause. I think it's so important that, while I have the deepest admiration for Bernie Sanders and was proud to be one of his co-chairs, I think it is important for progressives to build durable infrastructure like the conservatives had that transcends any particular election cycle and is there for the next 20, 30 years so that we can build our ideals regardless of any particular candidate or particular cycle. We need to excite folks a bold vision, and what progressives, in my view, should be doing is to say to President Biden, what is most missing is not the correct pronunciation of every sentence. What is most missing is a bold vision for 2024 of what we will do when we win. We need to run on universal child care. We need to run on free public college. We need to run on a living wage. We need to run on ending medical debt. We need to run on ending fossil fuel subsidies. We need to run on Medicare for all. We need to run on dental, vision, hearing for expanding Medicare. We need to run on a wealth tax at a time that there's deep income inequality. We need to say that we're going to have massive, bold investments in affordable housing and capping rents. There is a huge agenda that can inspire. It's the agenda that will inspire more than, in this case, just the candidate. I mean, you can talk about what we've done, but you have to talk about what we will do. And if we have that bold agenda, we will be able to inspire people to get out and vote. And that also has to include foreign policy. You want to talk about how we get people back after the disaster in Gaza? How about saying that in the next term, the president will bilaterally recognize a Palestinian state, like countries have done, 143 plus countries around the world? If we give people a vision, I think young people will respond and come out and vote.
Thank you, Representative.
Is this on? Okay. Again, thank you. It's really an honor to be here today to have this conversation. I come from what the nation would call a deep red state. I come from the state of Missouri. When you're actually in Missouri, though, we consider ourselves more purple. I live in St. Louis City, which is very progressive. We have a progressive mayor, progressive congressperson, progressive majority on our board of aldermen, which I have the pleasure of leading. And we're also a state that overwhelmingly continues to vote for progressive issues at the ballot. So for example, we have voted in the last few years to legalize marijuana with some of the most progressive laws in the entire country. We have passed ethics reform overwhelmingly at the ballot in the state. We have over and over and over again shown that our voters like progressive ideas, even when they don't necessarily vote for progressives or Democratic candidates. And why that's so important going into this election is because in Missouri and a dozen other states across the country, abortion is going to be on the ballot. We collected the signatures, nearly 500,000 signatures, to put it on the ballot in Missouri. That is a lot of signatures. And that'll be on the November ballot, along with paid family leave and $15 an hour minimum wage that is then tied to inflation going forward. And we know our voters are going to come out and approve these things because time and time again they do. And so when we're riling progressives up or trying to get them to the polls, it's not just about the presidency. It's also about all of those issues that are on the ballot. It's about the down ballot. We're in a state in Missouri where the Republicans have a supermajority in our state House and Senate. And it makes it nearly impossible to get progressive legislation done through our state capitol. But we also know, because of the organizing we've done over the last few years, we only need to flip 3 seats this time around, and then that supermajority goes away. We have those targets. We know that they're winnable. But they're only winnable if folks show up and vote the entire ticket, right? Not just for president, all the way down, and vote for all of the ballot initiatives on the way.
Good afternoon. First, thank you to Our Revolution for just organizing just really this very important pointed discussion that I think is long overdue, but one that we as progressives certainly need to constantly have our role both in this movement and our relationship to the Democratic Party, because what is clear is that when it comes to progressives, our votes, our coalition, our caucus is needed. But our ideas, our demands, our priorities that we're often pushing are essentially put as back burner issues, as backseat issues. And so, for me as someone who was elected in a state that is majority Democratic, we like to consider ourselves a progressive enclave right on the East Coast. But there's so much work that we still need to do both as a state and really as a movement, I think we have to first acknowledge that we have a winning message. We have a winning message. Medicare for all is a winning message, right? Bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom is a winning message. Collective bargaining rights, workers' rights is a winning message. Racial, social, economic justice is a winning message. The problem is there is a disconnect between both the party but also when it comes to policy. And I'll give an example. Of all the Democratic states that passed the Fight for 15, Maryland, being the supermajority state legislature that it is, passed the weakest. And I always tell folks that if there's anyone that's running for the state legislature and telling you that they're going to Annapolis to fight against Republicans, don't vote for them. Because the fight isn't against Republicans, it is a fight among the Democratic Party and the various wings. And it is clear because really Maryland's emblematic of what we're seeing across the country, and that is neoliberalism is winning. It is being embraced by our party, and it is the policies, these decade-long neoliberal policies that have brought us to this place where neo-fascism could potentially win again. So we have a winning message. We just need to see more progressive candidates. And to my panelists to my left, I completely agree. I think there needs to be a shift from this focused on federal politics and elections and start talking about states, counties, and municipal and board of education, and where the majority of issues that impact all of our lives are decided, not at the federal level. If I were to put it percentage-wise, 80% of the issues that impact you all are decided at the state and local level. So we have to shift, and we need to see more progressive candidates, and we have to start holding this party accountable to our values, to our ideas, to our policies, because neoliberalism is the modus operandi for the Democratic Party.
And of course, I'm Larry Stafford Jr., Executive Director of Progressive Maryland, and very happy to have some of my team in the room, including Sir James over there, Christiane. And we're an organization that believes in the fundamental value of like going out into our communities, actually listening to people, seeing what is on their heart, what is happening in their life, what's on their minds, and trying to bring them together to do something about that. And so I don't just mention that just to, just describe our organization, but I mention that because I think that is one of the most fundamental things that has gotten lost in politics when we look around the country right now, and we talk about this federal election or even our local elections here. I think like our ears are not functioning as well right now at this point. That includes people in power at the top, the middle level, all levels, because I think what we've been missing is that people are hurting. I know like it's like easy for us to be able to say that and so like, yeah, I agree, right? But no, really, right now where you're at is Baltimore City. I challenge anybody, just go down the street and talk to some folks or just look, right? Baltimore is emblematic of what's happening in so many places across the country. Just as my brother Gabe alluded to, we've had 40 to 50 years of neoliberalism and austerity that has absolutely rocked our country from urban areas to rural communities. And it's not getting through people's heads, really, why there is a possibility of fascism taking over in our country. We're not listening. I'll just give it a quick example. Like in the debate, Joe Biden looked tired. I think we've all been tired, right? But outside of the commentary about whatever his well-being may be, and the commentary about Donald Trump and his, just insanity, like I just give it just an example. Like the question on childcare was asked in the debate. Donald Trump completely dodged it and just focused on attacking Joe Biden. And then Joe Biden, I think, in an offhand remark, mentioned the child tax credit. I remember looking at that and saying, like, there are three fundamental issues right now that I think are driving a lot of angst amongst voters that honestly Democrats need to win. This population of voters are very much impacted by what's happening in housing. Where did we talk about, where was there a serious conversation about the cost of living, which is mostly being driven by the cost of rent and radical increases to the cost to like have a mortgage, the rising interest rates? Did we have that discussion at the debate? I don't recall it. Maybe I missed it. I might have went to the restroom. The cost of childcare for families. No real substantive discussion about that. So I'll just end with saying, I think we have to start with listening, because if you go to door to door like our organizer, Sir James, does, if you listen to people in these communities, you'll find a pathway to victory, but they have to believe that you're listening to them first. So I'll close with that.
Thanks, Larry. Listening is the first rule of good organizing. So I want to have a follow-up question for the congressman. In terms of the administration, and you're a surrogate for the Biden campaign, what you said is, well, we need to articulate, right? We need the president and the party to articulate an agenda, a vision of what we're willing to fight for. Are they listening to that? Because even for myself, I find hard to articulate, like, this is what we're gonna achieve over the course of the next 4 years and what we're gonna fight for.
Well, Joseph, I think they aren't listening enough. You know, to Larry's point about the debate, the part of the debate that I found the most appalling, the most out of touch, was you had these two old people talking about their golf handicap. And I was like, what America are they living in and trying to lead? I mean, how many people do you know who are out there arguing about who has a better golf handicap? My guess is, I don't know the statistics. I doubt that the vast majority of Americans have even been on a golf course, let alone arguing about their handicap. What they're arguing about is, or thinking about, or struggling about is rent. And then, by the way, they're talking about that rent, the cost of rent in my district, which is the wealthiest district in the country, as much as they're talking about rent in Baltimore, because we've got massive economic inequality. And the president could address that. He could come out clearly and say, look, we've got a housing shortage, and in a market that has been distorted because there's not enough apartments and housing, we have a situation where rents have gone up and all those rents are going to the landlord. And so we're going to cap rent and not have rent go higher than inflation. And by the way, in places like New Jersey that have done those rent caps, it doesn't increase the shortages, because the shortages already exist. You've got an artificial market with the landlords exploiting it. All it does is it makes sure landlords can't exploit it. And we can say we're going to stop Wall Street from buying up more of these apartment complexes and more of these single-family homes. And then if you said that, if I said that, even if I didn't have perfect grammar, people would still vote for us, because they want their rents not to go up. But if they think that there's not going to be significant change, that it's going to be more of the same, that yes, we're going to have more chips factories, that was my bill, but that's not immediate, that's not tangible for their lives tomorrow, then we're not going to be able to inspire them to vote. So I've said to the team, the administration, you don't have to do the laundry list or the big progressive agenda that many of us have talked about, that Gabriel and Megan have talked about, but pick three big things. I happen to think childcare and housing are two good ones to start with, and probably healthcare the third. And just drive that home, that that's what you're going to fight for.
And we hope they're listening.
Well, look, this is the time, and let me just say this. I'm proud of the progressives. I'm proud of Senator Sanders and Pramila Jayapal and AOC and others for being disciplined. Because you know what the irony here is? I spent, as co-chair of Bernie Sanders' campaign, 1 year listening to James Carville on CNN say that Bernie Sanders was unelectable. I'm glad now he's talking about Joe Biden being unelectable. I mean, it's about, you know, 1 year he said Bernie Sanders was unelectable. These folks are driven by one thing, polls. See, progressives, we're not driven just by polls. We're driven by vision. We're driven by ideals. We believe that if you actually believe in something, then you fight for something, you can persuade people to come along. And this is the first time that the progressives are not being blamed. Usually the first thing they do is, oh, there's a catastrophe, progressives are to blame. Well, guess what? The progressives have been the ones saying, we respect the process and let's go win and let's have a bold vision. Well, you've got all these Democratic operatives freaking out on the polls and attacking each other. So I'm actually proud of the progressive movement, and I think this is the time for the president to listen to a few of the big ideas of the movement, and I'm hopeful they will.
And a follow-up for both Megan and Gabe. Are you fearful in this moment that there's going to be a down ballot drag? And given that you're at a level of government that's closest to the people, you're moving things that are transforming people's lives, whether it's housing, whether it's on wages, are you afraid that this election could set back the progress that we're making at state and local levels?
I think Missouri is a little bit of a different ball of wax in this way. I think the general sentiment amongst whether it's mainstream Democrats or progressives in Missouri is that there is not a probably snowball's chance in hell that any Democrat wins the presidential nomination or a Democrat wins president in Missouri. But we do think that there is opportunity for our Senate seat. Josh Hawley is on the ballot. He is very not popular even amongst Republicans. And so we're putting a lot of organizing into that race. And we know with abortion on the ballot, there is projected to be about $20 million spent on that in the state of Missouri. And I think it's those ballot issues and those races that we do think are winnable are the ones that are ultimately going to end up driving folks to the polls. And as a side note, you know, in the city of St. Louis, something that I've worked on for a few years and a few election cycles with our revolution is we've essentially created our own progressive organizing pack for the St. Louis area. And so we're doing that voter turnout to talk to voters and say, yes, please come out and vote to put abortion in the Constitution. And also, if you want to keep these rights, you must vote Democrat the entire way down the ballot. And so we're leading with the issue. We're leading with it on $15 an hour minimum wage and paid family leave, saying the same thing. If you are voting for these ballot initiatives, then you must also vote straight ticket Democrat, because otherwise, and we have seen this happen, something gets passed at the polls and then the Republican legislature comes back into session and they repeal it. And they completely undo the will of what voters have voted on in the state. And so we're trying to tie the issues that people care about to being a Democrat and get folks used to the fact that if they are in favor of these progressive issues and progressive causes and they want to keep them and maintain them, then you have to also vote Democrat the entire way down, even if the candidates are not necessarily your favorite person or the person you were, voting for in the primaries.
I'll say really quickly, because I see Congresswoman Lee has joined us and would love to, but I'll be very quick, and I'll say it's good to see you. That in a blue state like Maryland, I think the dynamics of the presidential race, I don't think it has any impact on down ballot offices and candidates. I think in part because, one, we're a blue state, but many of us are organizing in the interim outside of presidential years on issues that we can decide on, that states and localities decide on, that people care deeply about. Going back to what I said earlier about the majority of the issues that impact our everyday lives are decided at the state and at the local level. And so for many years, even though we hadn't seen any movement, any traction on bills relating to police accountability in the US Congress, a lot of us were organizing right here in Maryland before and after Freddie Gray was killed, before and after George Floyd was killed, to ensure that we're educating folks, but we're also changing the laws that would have a ripple impact. And I would say we've done that. We've been successful at that. We were able to repeal the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, which is essentially a legislation that protects corrupt and racist cops that many states have adopted from Maryland. We started it right here. So your Police Bill of Rights in Kentucky, when we talk about accountability for the killers of Breonna Taylor, the reason why you can't have accountability is because other states have adopted this very racist law that protects corrupt and racist cops. And so we were able to organize to get that repealed. We were able to get Anton's Law passed, legislation that I've been championing for many years. But we recognize that there's still work to do. Again, going back to what I said, the neoliberalism and the way that our party sort of rally around neoliberal ideas and candidates. And so even though we were able to get police accountability passed, really important things like ending no-knock warrants, addressing white nationalism in law enforcement, ending qualified immunity in state courts are things that some Democrats in the legislature felt like it was just too far. And this is where the apathy sets in. This is where impacted communities who have been told time and again, come out and vote, but their everyday lives and the material conditions aren't changing. This is where the apathy sets in and where we see a rise of neo-fascism. And so we're always organizing in the interim, regardless of who's running for president on either side of major parties. We're organizing because we recognize that state and local government has impact. And to give one more example really quickly on how states matter and the impact on federal issues. We talked about marriage equality being the law of the land, via Supreme Court decision. Maryland was the first state to pass that legislatively, but also as a ballot initiative. And we would have never had that case being brought before the Supreme Court and plaintiffs if it were not for a couple that got married on the BWI tarmac when Maryland legalized marriage equality and later served as plaintiffs that had an impact on the law of the land and changing laws to ensure that there is marriage equality. There's power in organizing at the state and local level, and there's power in electing progressives at the state and local level. We just have to shift from this focus on federal politics and start realizing the same way Republicans did. They recognize that states are where it's at. They're the laboratories for democracy, but they're also the laboratories for public policy. And so when you see many states gerrymandering and passing all these laws and policies, it is because Republicans and neo-fascist conservatives have made a concerted effort to focus on the states. We have to do the same, and it will have a ripple effect, I think, not just in other states, but on federal policy as well.
Thanks, Gabe. And now I want to welcome the living legend, United States Representative, a longtime leader of the progressive movement in our country. So Barbara, the discussion that we're having is, given the debate performance, progressives, our revolution members, don't feel confident that the president can win against Donald Trump. And the question that we're discussing is, how do we try to motivate our base in this moment? How do we get progressives out to vote in this moment?
Well, thank you very much for this invitation to be here. Let me tell you, this is a breath of fresh air being here with you. Joe, thank you for keeping hope alive with our revolution. I tell you, it's been really awesome working with you and Bernie and the whole progressive movement throughout the years, and especially in the last couple of years with my Senate campaign. So thank you all so much. And Roe's our resident economist. He every day breaks down all this stuff where we can understand economic policy and economic theory, but also he's a friend and a leader. So thank you. It's really good to see you off of the floor. We all have our, like in the black church, we have our seats where we go and what we do. And so it's good to see you here. And to Megan, Gabrielle, and Larry, just listening to you all in the last couple of minutes really is inspirational. And it says to me that we're on the right track. Because I was in the state legislature, everyone wanted to know why I left chairing a committee and had a constituency of 840,000, much larger than congressional campaigns, and run for Congress. That was 26 years ago, but then, it was even then we began to see the power of local and state governments in terms of changing, the world. And I still think that we all have to have that as a goal, changing the world for the better. So let me tell you, I think this election, you'd have to tell me who you think, first of all, could beat Donald Trump if there's a candidate. But secondly, you have to tell me that, the priorities in this election should be the progressive agenda and making sure that we educate voters about what's at stake. Of course, our democracy, our economic issues, health care, all of the issues, housing. These are the issues that are on the ballot. Defense spending, climate. So the candidates that address these issues, that are going to do the work and engage in systemic structural change so that we can move forward, is the candidate we should be talking about. Beyond that, who knows? I mean, I personally am supporting the president and will continue to do that. And I tell you, I have served through several presidents, and I have been a staff member to the late great warrior Ron Dellums, Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, you name it. I was an intern during Watergate. And so I get it. And so you have to tell me how we could elect someone at this point in time other than the current president and when. But the most important part, I think, is our agenda and challenging candidates to step up and to live up to our progressive agenda. And I have to say, with President Biden, thank goodness for the Progressive Caucus and for all of you. We've made remarkable progress. I think more progressive policies have been fought for and put in place than any president that I've seen recently. And at least when you look at what was Build Back Better, when you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, when you look at insulin and reducing the cost of prescription drugs and fighting to make sure that the government is in a position to negotiate a reduction in medicines and pharmaceuticals, when you look at the position of reproductive freedom and to have a president out there supporting ending the Hyde Amendment, which it took a while for me to even get Democrats to support, which of course you know what the Hyde Amendment is. We passed appropriations bills without the Hyde Amendment when we were in the majority. Okay, that was a big deal. It's been in place since '79, which the Hyde Amendment denies reproductive access, including abortion care, to low-income women, primarily who are women of color. So we've made some remarkable progress, and we have a president who has supported these efforts. A lot more to do, a lot of places we have to go. But so that's just where I am on that. And in terms of the whole issue around poverty, you know what? I was checking out a document earlier from progressives, and the P word wasn't even in it. And I am trying to get progressives to understand that working men and women are who we have to fight for, but we also have to use the word poor and low income and people who are living on the edge. And we work with the Poor People's Campaign. And so the progressive agenda has to include seeing people and using language that people know that you see them. And our work speaks for itself. But when you don't use poor, when you don't use poverty, when you don't talk about lifting children out of poverty, then you're not connecting, and we're not broadening our base of support. And finally, I'll just say, I'm just getting my 2 cents in right now, on Project 2025. If we don't elect a Democratic House, Senate, and White House, Project 2025 is looming. In fact, it's been in place for a few years, and I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and let's say being here is a breath of fresh air. We were in until 10 o'clock last night, every day this week. And all of their policies that we fought against, you could cite in Project 2025. And I cited provisions of that and their amendments. They dovetailed. They were exactly what came out of Project 2025. So if that's not enough to talk to people about, to elect more Democrats, I don't know what is. And so I just urge and encourage you to be intentional about this and don't allow a malaise or cynicism to set in, because we have a lot of work to do, and it's going to be the progressive movement with our allies that's going to win this thing in November.
Barbara, a quick follow-up. How do we get the administration, the campaign, to articulate this progressive agenda,
Well,
rather than just laying out like Trump's a threat, which he is?
well, they may not be able to articulate it. We may have to be the ones to articulate it. I'm telling you, I believe in the power of people. I believe in grassroots organizing. I believe in people being those messengers. They are who they are. And you think you're going to change an 81-year-old man talking, and age is a factor? Everything, but be honest and truthful. You're not going to change people. We know the work, and we know how to message ourselves to people authentically. So don't expect anybody else to do it. Please. Otherwise, we won't win.
We have our marching orders. So, Paco?
Yeah.
So I want to open this up for questions. And Paco's got a microphone, and he will bring it to you. So if you've got a question for our panelists,
Yeah, no problem. Good afternoon.
where are you from?
My name is Lawrence. I'm from Baltimore. So I understand strategically there's going to be fundamental differences, but in Baltimore, there are fundamental tactical issues of agreement where we just aren't seeing Democrats step up with progressive, even when it's in Democratic Party's best interest. We have Sinclair Media supporting Trump, supporting Larry Hogan, and they're putting ballot initiatives on the ballot to shrink the city council, literally making less Democrats. And we're seeing the Democratic Party shy away from fighting that because they don't want to be on Fox. No Democratic elected official wants to be on Fox News every night. Local Fox News, the potential scandals. Even with, tactically, there is a group called Democrats for Hogan. And a powerful state senator declared his support, former state senator. If this were Democrats for West, Democrats for Gloria LaRivia, the Democratic Party would be attacking this person vociferously. But they're very well funded and they're very well connected to AIPAC and the Israel lobby. So there's just silence, even when it be in the Democratic Party's interest to attack these moderate Democrats coming out for Hogan. They're just so scared. How can we trust them when it's even in their best interest to fight Sinclair Media putting ballot initiatives, to fight Democrats for Hogan? How can we trust them to come through on any of the progressive agenda when locally we don't see them standing up to the conservatives and the moderates, even when it's in their best interest?
Yeah, so just to give a little bit more context to what my man Lawrence was talking about, so in Baltimore City, like many cities across the country, there's a Sinclair Broadcasting station. So some of you may remember Sinclair Broadcasting from John Oliver's segment some years ago. But they run these scripted programs across the country pushing a right-wing agenda at a local level. So they fly under the radar because they're a national media network, but they focus only locally. So it's very interesting. And in Baltimore City, they function not only as a media outlet, they run a TV news station, but they also have a sort of political arm as well that does ballot initiatives. One to shrink the size of city council, and I believe they're also supportive of another one that would basically bankrupt the city of Baltimore by cutting property taxes, right? So, and they've had success before. They recently instituted term limits in Baltimore City for, I believe, the city council and mayor as well. And so they're very insidious and very dangerous, right? But you don't hear that getting talked about a lot. And that's something that will be incredibly damaging to the city of Baltimore. So we're involved in the fight right now against what Sinclair is doing with these ballot initiatives. But Lawrence is absolutely right that Democrats are far too terrified because they've seen examples of Sinclair Broadcasting pretty much tear like, politicians apart, right? I'd name one example being Marilyn Mosby, the former state's attorney here, who I would argue had almost her life ripped apart by Sinclair and their allies in the FOP, who had like private investigators, they have a team of opposition researchers, like just practically work after her prosecution of the police officers who were involved in the death of Freddie Gray. They worked around the clock, night and day, to make her a menace to the public in the city of Baltimore. So we've got to have much more of a backbone in the Democratic Party, frankly, to stand up to things like this. But also, like what we're doing in Baltimore now is like bringing together coalitions of organizations to let people know that even your local news sometimes can't be trusted. And I don't know how Sinclair is an actor in other cities, but we're very concerned that this could spread to city after city if this model is shown to work. Oh, and I failed to mention they recently purchased the Baltimore Sun.
Yep.
So we're gonna have a panel all about this on Saturday at 10:15 if you're interested. But yeah, definitely worth discussing.
And I'll just say quickly, Democrats aren't good, and the Democratic Party, in my opinion, at sort of this offensive, particularly around Republicans and Republican candidates. A good example of that, to Lawrence's point, I call him Lion Larry, sometimes call him Lawrence, but we're not going to call him Lawrence because I don't want you all to get confused. But this is someone who essentially has had a terrible term as governor of Maryland. And I'm not being hyperbolic, is someone who walked into the governorship and walked out, a lot richer, someone who didn't invest in the jurisdictions that really drive our state from Baltimore City to Montgomery, Prince George's, and elsewhere. This is someone who demonized Freddie Gray as someone who's not worthy of our advocacy, et cetera. And it's also someone who was terrible at dealing with the crisis, the COVID crisis that we were experiencing. But Democrats, both in this state, and I think nationally we're seeing it as well, are not good at going on the offensive about Larry's terrible record, the things that he's done while here in the state of Maryland, and he's in no way a moderate or an independent, but he recognizes that if he distances himself from the neo-fascists and the crazies of his party, that some folks in this state will say, well, he's not like the rest, right? But let's be clear, Larry, he ain't like us, right? That's for sure, and he's definitely very much of a Republican and a conservative in that regard. But we have to go on the offensive. We have a strong message, but we have to put it out there, and we have to start going after people who lie about their record and their positions on things.
And if I could chime in real quick, I don't think that the Democratic Party is the vehicle, quite honestly, to push back on this. I think that the vehicle to push back on this is community organizing. So in St. Louis, we have something called the People's Plan Coalition. It's a coalition of 52 different organizations, racial justice organizations, labor unions, environmental organizations, who have all come together to basically form an organizing table. And that organizing table works very closely with the progressives who are in elected office, and collectively, we work on organizing strategy, because our Democratic Party in St. Louis and across Missouri does not do anything. And they spend more time fighting to repeal ethics reforms that voters passed at the ballot box than they do actually trying to educate and talk to voters. And so we've realized that that is not going to be the vehicle to push back on fascism or push back on Project 2025, that we're going to have to do it through community work and community organizing.
Thank you.
Akane Freechild with Brentwood, Maryland, although I'm in Wisconsin for the summer. Thank you all, especially Representative Lee and Representative Khanna, for championing democracy reform, the Freedom to Vote Act, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. My question is, many of us are working at the state level. There's a lot to be done there, but people do feel, in a vague way at minimum, that our federal government is not representative. The Electoral College has always been broken. Now the courts are more broken than ever. The Senate is broken. So what kind of messaging do you feel like is important for progressives to get out there about the deep, even deeper than the Freedom to Vote Act now, change that we need if we're going to have something strong and representative at the top.
Well, you're absolutely right about the structural barriers to getting things that are deeply popular passed. The problem is big money when it comes to having basic reform against big pharma. I mean, the fact that we capped insulin was impressive, but we still haven't done it for a lot of the private sector insurance. There are a lot of other drugs that we haven't done. And the reason for this is that the pharma lobbyists and the big money influence. We still haven't gotten fossil fuel subsidies repealed because of the influence of the big oil companies. So you have one thing, which is big money. Then you've got a Supreme Court that is total corruption. I mean, quid pro quo. And, you know, the ruling on immunity for the president, that somehow you can do an official act. Let me tell you, if you're a legislator and someone says, I want you to vote some way and I'll give you $1 million, that's an official act. It's bribery. You'd go to jail. But somehow, if the president gets bribed or does official acts, that there's immunity. I mean, this court is so out of touch, and then they're sitting on cases where they've got financial interests directly with conflicts of interest. So you've got a court that is a problem. Then you have the Senate with a filibuster that has blocked the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that has blocked the George Floyd Policing Act, that has blocked the legalization of abortion with the Roe versus Wade framework, that has blocked every gun violence basic bill, that is blocking increasing the minimum wage. And I think progressives need to say, in addition to the policies, we need structural reform. We need term limits on these Supreme Court justices. We need a judicial code of ethics. We need to end the filibuster. We need to get rid of super PACs. We need to overturn Citizens United. And we need to stop super PAC spending in our own Democratic primaries. Enough with that, where big money is coming into these primaries and dictating the election. The only thing that makes the time I get most sympathetic to Joe Biden is the headlines that say big money donors want new nominee. I feel like Biden should just run on that. I'm not the choice of the big money donors. But, you know, we need structural reform in this country because people get that the federal government isn't working for them.
Yeah. Well, as we say, I associate myself with all of the remarks of my colleagues. I'll just add a bit to this. We've got to get to public financing of campaigns.
Yep.
That's bottom line. But I have to say, and Roe laid out the structural issues and why it's not working. Remember, as an African American, my perspective goes a little deeper because it's never worked, okay? Yeah. It's never worked. And we've been fighting this fight since we've been here in this country, and still trying to break the chains of being enslaved because of the structural and systemic issues that have been part of this country's systems, both in the corporate and business and private sector and in our governments. And so I think that we have to be ready for struggle. We have to understand that this is a marathon and that we have to organize at the local level, because I was listening to what Megan was saying. The only way the Democratic Party is going to change is through pushing the Democratic Party to a more progressive position. The only way that's going to happen is grassroots organizing. And so I really believe that we're at that inflection point and at that defining moment where we can go backwards or forwards. I remember the days of Jim Crow. I remembered, you know, my family, my dad served in Normandy. I mean, he was in the 92nd Battalion in World War II, in the segregated battalion in combat, based in Italy. And I was just in Normandy thinking about him and what happened. And when he came back, he couldn't even buy a house for his family. You know what I mean? So we have to not go back, but look at this in a historical context and where we are. And look at how the black community, in many ways, just basically got a few of our rights, and we're still fighting for that. And so we can't give up. And we have to address the federal government, especially from a structural place, and that's where progressives come in, because progressives understand systemic change and not tinkering around the edges. We know we have to go for it, and we also are practical, and we know if we go for it, and I'm going to tell you, when I was in the, and this is an example of structural, why I'm talking about progressives, I was in the California legislature with a very right-wing governor, Pete Wilson. I was the most progressive, he was right-wing. He signed more of my bills into law than anyone else, any other Democrat. And you know why? Because I staked out the left turf. And I did not start on negotiations in the middle. I started to the left. He was all the way up here. And by the time we muddled through this, I got stuff done. And so I think we have to really be true to ourselves as progressives, but know that we also have to bring people along and the movement along. And we have to not get cynical and not believe that we can't make these changes. Look at France, look at how, and I was there, I mentioned during Normandy, you look at then, I knew then, because I talked to a lot of people. I said, no, the right wing's not going to take this, because the folks, people, said, no way, we're going to push back on this. And you see what they did. They formed the alliances, and they won. And so this is instructive in terms of what we have to do and should do in an American context.
Thank you. My name is Carlos from Waldorf, Maryland. My question really is, my question is geared towards, I know that there is a push from a push around Project 25 and the issues with that. I'll say as Black people, we've kind of been living through Project 2025 for a long time. But in the push to make the Democratic Party a more progressive party, we've seen that while the Democratic Party will not come out and fight Republicans on issues, they will definitely use all their force against progressives to smear us. And do we as progressives see it as this party, it may not be viable to move any type of change, and there needs to be a push for a third party or something outside of the Democratic Party to say, hey, look, if you don't make a change, we have somewhere else to go. And I also look at it as a Black person. For us, we're all with the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party for years has taken us for granted to say, I have your vote no matter what. So maybe as Black people, if we separate to say, hey, you have to earn our vote again, we'll actually get some benefits from a party to say, hey, we want your vote, so we have to move things along for you. Do you all see any move or that you all support of moving for a third party, whether it be green, independent, however, to combat the constant rightward shift of the Democratic Party?
Oh, my man Carlos right there. I just wanted to jump on that question right there. And good to see you, Carlos. You're looking stronger now and everything too, man. I see you. I see you, man.
And I like that T-shirt, Carlos.
Yeah. But to speak to your question, I was just going to say, so I'll say yes and no, right? And I'll explain as well. Because unfortunately, like this, on the no side, this country has built so many barriers to like legal third parties that it's like absolutely insane. Like just structural barriers that like prohibit third-party candidates from being viable, certainly at the federal level, but we've even seen at the local level. I don't even know if the like local Green Party even has like the validity now to be able to be on the ballot at this point. I'm not up to date with that. So that's my no side, but yes, absolutely to the side that says we need to get organized under coordinated political vehicles with a base of people united around an agenda to move that agenda through whatever government body that we need to move that through and to elect people who are representative of that body. So that's a very complicated way of saying it maybe, but I'll note that in other countries around the world, they don't have such a structured government-sponsored party system. I mean, we've just had elections in France and other places where, you know, they have laws where it's like more easy to just start a party. Like you can just say, hey, I am a party of one person, and you can get on the ballot much more easily than in the United States. So that's why I don't look at parties in the same way. Like, I just refuse to accept the United States-driven like conception of a party. I look at political vehicles. And we have our caucuses, like it sounds like in St. Louis, you have a group of progressives that were able to get a majority on that government body right there. Similar to in Prince George's County, we were able to, in the first time in history, to have like a group of progressives to form a caucus that constituted a majority at the local level there. So, and I think those caucuses, like Ms. Megan Green was just describing, like need to be coordinated with organizations that are working to build a base in the community to get behind them. And for me, that is a party. Like now you've got other structures that we can get into later about like party discipline and making sure that there's accountability between those who are representing this pseudo party in office and those in the community. But those are definitely structures that we need to build into place. But unfortunately, the United States context just makes just going and filing and just creating this magical new party like nearly impossible. It's been tried over and over and over again. I think we need to be more organized as caucuses and as base building vehicles that can move votes and move policy.
I'll add another little anecdote to that. I think other thing we need to get better at on the left is teaching other folks, community organizers, other people on the left, how to actually get into the Democratic Party. And what I mean by that is, so in 2016, Bernie won the Democratic primary in Missouri. Nobody thought that was going to happen, but he did. And so we organized all of our Bernie delegates across the state. We got them to show up to the state convention. And the Hillary delegates were pretty complacent. They had, been to 1 million state conventions, didn't really think it was a big deal. We walked in and we realized that we had 100 more delegates that showed up than they did. So we unseated all of their DNC members. I got elected to the DNC, sat on it for 4 years along with 3 other Bernie supporters. We were able to take over the leadership for the Missouri Democratic Party. And we did it basically because we just told the community how you show up and become a delegate. Because half the time, after people think that you vote in a primary and then that's it. But if you show up and you go to your caucus, you then go to your state convention, you get elected to the national, like there's ways to influence the party. And we ended up completely rewriting the policy platform for the Missouri Democratic Party, making it an extremely progressive agenda, but that would not have happened if we didn't do the organizing to really teach folks at the grassroots level how you can get engaged in party politics to influence it, because the party is made up of the people. And even though there can be a lot of roadblocks sometimes and lack of information on how to get involved, once you figure out that roadmap, and I think our job as elected officials and leaders is to educate folks on that roadmap, then it can be somewhat easy to get involved and actually change and push that party to be what we want it to be.
I, in the day, thought we should establish and put together a Black political party. I came out of that movement. Also, I was a community worker with the Black Panther Party. And, okay. I knew Huey Newton very well, and I know Bobby Seale very well. And while I wasn't a party member, I was part of the party's political operation. And we had these discussions, the same as we're having today, and made a decision that the Black Panther Party, we had our 10-point program where we could relate to people like feeding hungry kids, like providing our bagged groceries, providing shoes for people, the concrete kind of, this is who we are, we want to make your life better. At the same time, we're talking about structural change. And so we had the vision of being a political movement, which in Oakland and in other areas we became. And I encourage you to watch the movie if you haven't watched Shirley. Shirley Chisholm was my mentor. I was the one who got the Black Panther Party. The film is out with Regina King, and there's a character in there, Barbara Lee, played by Christina Jackson. So the movie, though, is instructive because it shows you what someone who had never registered to vote, who felt like we had to continue with my revolutionary work and thought the Democrats and the Republicans and whomever weren't relating to me as a young black woman on public assistance raising 2 kids by myself as a single mom, okay? So, but I was very active and very intentional about not voting because I didn't believe in the Democratic Party. So what happened was I met Shirley Chisholm. I was president of the Black Student Union also. She came and she took me to task. And she told me that she liked my views. She was very forceful, and the movie shows all of this, and that she wanted me to work with her as a volunteer to help her in her campaign. Bottom line is I went to Huey Newton and to Bobby Seale, who had never been involved in politics, like myself, intentionally, and convinced them that we should get involved and be a force to be reckoned with, and use the Shirley Chisholm presidential primary campaign as our test. So we did, and I introduced Huey Newton to Shirley Chisholm, and they got together, and we got together, and we registered thousands of people to vote. Shirley Chisholm spoke out on behalf of the Black Panther Party and said it's a darn shame that we need a Black Panther Party in this country, but because we do, I support them and want to see their agenda move forward. And we took 8 to 10% of the vote in Alameda County, and the rest is history. Then Bobby Seale ran for mayor, and then we finally got a black mayor. And I shared this, and I registered to vote. And have been pushing the Democratic Party to become more progressive, more democratic, and more inclusive. And I use that just as an example of my history because I think some of that is still relevant today. And we have to know our power. We have to know what power means. And if we don't, because of the structural issues, have a third party or even the vehicle for one at this point, we still have to be powerful and use our progressive power to make these major structural changes that we have to make in this country.
That is, Megan and Barbara are so eloquent. I'll just say something very simple. If Donald Trump can take over completely the Republican Party in 8 years, then progressive sure as hell can take over the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders almost did, and they stopped him through a lot of shenanigans. But with this group, I mean, they want you to forget how close we came. There should be progressives and a progressive platform leading this party for the next 20 years, if you look at where the base of voters are.
That's right.
Thank you. We are out of time. Please give a round of applause for our amazing panelists. And we're going to get ready for the next session. I just want to close with one observation. This is a trying time for our country. It's a trying time for progressives. But if anything that I picked up out of this conversation is this: we've got to keep organizing, and we can push for progress. And we have a chant at our revolution. It's called, when we organize, we win. I want you to say it with me. When we organize, we win. When we organize, we win. When we organize, we win. Thank you.